Hi, this is Uncle Matt's D&D Studio. I'm Matt Finch, and if you play Dungeons & Dragons, and especially old school Dungeons & Dragons, please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel, and now we'll move on to the video.
And we're live. This is Matt Finch, and I am here with Wolfgang Baur of the well-known Kobold Press. And we're going to talk a little bit about something interesting that Wolfgang's doing. But Wolfgang, my first question, just because I thought of it, has to do with dice. Any new dice? Just tell me about dice.
There are new dice in the family. There are always new dice in the family. I mean, I pick up dice at just about every convention I go to. I've always sort of trading through dice. But the new dice that came for Christmas were for my daughter. I gave her a set of those weird little My Little Pony dice, Dungeons & Dragons official branded My Little Pony dice from HasbroCon. Some kind of exclusive.
Hasbro's really working on combining some of those product lines.
They're trying to combine their IPs. I'm like, this is an abomination, but I think she's gonna love them, and so she got that set. Oh hey, and
let's see her.
Here is one of the little ones. She did not get her own dice. You want to be on the show? Daddy's got to do the show. Let me do the show, Claire. She's a ham and a camera hog. So.
Oh yeah, me too.
Oh, Sarah, that's enough. You broke my camera. All right, that did not go well. Apologies.
No problem. In fact, we're definitely not going to edit that out either. So
let me try to get it set up again. Oh man, I had it all perfect. All right.
You go. Actually, we've got better focus now.
It scared her off.
Okay. No, you didn't.
No, she's back.
Yeah. Okay, so
do the show.
Yes. So dice. You got some for yourself as well, presumably. Yes,
I did get some for myself. What did I get? I think I got a set of. They're sort of green. I had this. They're not jade. They're adventine. I don't know. There's some semi-precious stone, and they were like $40, and I'm like, yeah, but they're really nice. So, kind of the fanciest dice I've bought in a long time.
I like dark green on dice. That's one of those things. As I get older, I think that my ability to make out numbers on dice is starting.
Like high contrast, right? Like white on dark green or black on yellow. Those are easy to read, easy on the eyes. I've got all right, for days when my eyesight's really going, I've got this giant D20 about the size of an orange.
Yeah. Zach got me a whole set of foam dice for using.
Oh, yes. It's like, okay, we're going to make the big important roll now. Everyone's going to see it.
Right.
Here it is.
Of course, there's going to be the question about the balancing on the dice.
Yeah, sometimes those fancy dice don't actually roll all that true. So,
yeah. So let's I started out mentioning that you're doing a big OSR thing, and so let's move on from the important stuff about dice
to lesser topics
onto the creative side of stuff.
Sure.
Just in case anybody out there doesn't know, and that's possible. Kobold Press has been publishing forever and ever, and they are going to be making a move into old school Renaissance products, and so this is actually kind of a big announcement. And it was done a little bit earlier before, and it was just a soft launch on that. You didn't mention it to anyone, right?
Didn't really make a big deal out of it. It was a request from people as we were doing the Midgard Kickstarter. It's like, could you give us some support for Swords and Wizardry? And I said, I don't know, maybe I'll look into it. And the more I look, the more I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun. I bet we could do something. And we kind of did what we often do, which is we put it in the workshop. We kind of putted around with it. And then we said, yeah, I think we can do this. And we haven't made any big announcements. It's coming out in about March. So it's high time we told people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is available for pre-order right now, right?
It's
because
you've got
the layout done and all of that.
Yep.
Okay, so if you would, once we're done with the video, if you would message me the link to the pre-order, I'll put that in the description of the video, and presumably that link will continue to be the right link once sale item. Okay. So I'll put that in there. Now, how good a commercial move is this for you?
This is also the category of not a good commercial move. If I were a person from business school, I would say your return on investment here is probably poor. You should be working on the next Kobold Guide to Game Design or a new 5th edition product or something else. This falls into the category that we call passion projects or things we're doing for fun. Or experiments, frankly. And some of our experiments pay off and turn into a whole line of products, and others are just one-off fun things that we do. Hey, I got chocolate. Somebody brought me chocolate. Thank you.
Wow, you're doing something right.
I'm doing something right. I got chocolate.
My children I don't think my children ever gave me chocolate.
I'll take it. Apparently yes, I'm doing something right. So, okay. So yeah, I don't know if it's going to be a gangbuster sales item or not. My understanding is that the Old School Renaissance is a small, tightly knit community that does cool stuff and plays cool games. I've encountered it at North Texas and elsewhere. I'm not sure what it's like as an audience for a product from somebody who hasn't done a lot in this space before. We'll see.
But you've been playing since the late 70s, on the other hand.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess part of it for me is it feels like, yeah, this is stuff I already know. Looking at Swords and Wizardry, looking at various things in that space, I say, oh, this is things I used to play, and some of them I've still played more recently. But by and large, it's a return to form or a return home. And I don't want to call it nostalgia because I don't think it's quite that. It's a new thing.
The number of people that I've had describe it as a return home is staggering. I mean, you are so far from being the only person who said that. You know, just many people have sort of had that. And I mean, now one question about that too is fictional backing, because looking at the Midgard campaign, you're coming in with something that is I guess originally structurally designed for 5th edition.
No, it's older than that.
Oh, it is. Okay. All right.
Actually, the first products for it were done under 3.5. And then it had a Pathfinder run, a 4th edition run, a 13th Age run, and then a 5th edition run. So the new edition of Midgard is about 5th edition, but the setting is old.
Okay. And the setting, and we were talking real briefly before we started about fictional influences on it.
Sure.
And in terms of one of the things that I think people in the OSR look for, certainly not all of them, but there's a common trend of wanting to see stuff that is more based on swords and sorcery fiction than on the more traditional Tolkien line or the stuff that's been written after D&D sort of began to feed back on it. So it's sort of repeat what you were telling me about the fictional underpinnings of Midgard.
Sure. I mean, it's a dark fantasy setting, and that draws on my early influences, which are Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard. It pulls a fair bit from the Norse sagas, with a name like Midgard, no surprise, and some even from the old Brothers Grimm fairy tales before they got kind of cleaned up for publication. A whole lot of children who meet sticky ends, right?
Right.
So Deep Dark Forest is kind of what we draw from there. I would say it definitely falls more in the pulp tradition and the dark fantasy tradition, and you can call that swords and sorcery. There are evil high priests all over the place. There are cults and demons. I mean, yeah, there are some elves, but barely. I think that's a fair cop. I don't think of it in those terms. Like swords and sorcery to me is a fictional category rather than a games category. But thematically, yeah, that's where it is.
Well, I think and I think that mainly comes in, the people in the OSR, but before anyone ever started even putting a name on it, everyone was just trying to figure out how did this group get together, and so people started talking about, what the feel was as opposed to third edition, and one of the things that someone came up with was pulp and sword and sorcery as being descriptions of the feel of a lot of the older style games. So that's sort of how it comes into the mix. But
I think it's a great reference to draw on, a sort of weird fantasy, dark fantasy pulp. Midgard draws on a lot of that, as well as some of the older sort of saga, heroic, fight to the death, Conan stands alone type material.
Give me, okay, so now, so the first OSR product that you're doing is going to be the Midgard campaign for Swords and Wizardry.
Midgard Swords and Wizardry Guidebook. Yes, that's the one.
Okay. All right. So tell me about what is in that. Yeah.
Right. So it's sort of the mechanical bare bones that you need to run Swords and Wizardry characters in Midgard. There's a couple of new races, like kobolds are big in Midgard. There's a ton of monsters. I want to say 30 some monsters, and a bunch of spells and magic that are specific to the setting. So basically what we did is we tried to distill down, we put all of Midgard in a great big pot, and we boiled it down to, what can we fit in about 64 pages that will let somebody run the setting, or that they can kit bash into their own setting. And we said, okay, well, it's certain races like kobolds, trollkin, minotaurs. It's certain magic, like clockwork magic is big there. Shadow magic is all over the place. And I think that goes straight back to Gygax and his love of shadow stuff.
You're leaping right back into the early cauldron there.
Right. That's like the really early goodness. And I'm like, well, there should be more of this now in Midgard everywhere. We've got a whole Shadow Realm parallel universe thing in this setting. So that's fun. And the monsters that are most typical, right? So there's a certain bunch of fae who are all pretty nasty. There's clockwork monsters. There's certain dragons that are specific. We said, let's give those all Swords and Wizardry stats and see how far we get. And it's turned out pretty well. Oh, and the ley line magic, of course, which is sort of the old Celtic thought of standing stones, and magic is stronger at certain places. And if you're a wizard who understands ley lines, you can use them to empower your spells in interesting ways. That was
now see, I do that with druids. That's not supposed to be the magic users. You're doing it all wrong.
Well, we can argument about heresy and blasphemy here. No, see, druids don't get that stuff.
Yeah, sure they do. That's what druids are all about, man. Standing stones, and of course they've got to be connected to each other.
Actually, the ley lines of Midgard work for all spellcasters. You need to take a feat in 5th edition to do it. In Swords and Wizardry, obviously we've sort of pared back the rule set required to make it happen. You just need to be in the right place. But
right.
But yeah, all of those elements are sort of like, these are things that happen in Midgard that don't happen in most other campaign settings. So let's put them all in a book to make it easy. And I wouldn't say it's all mechanics. Some of it is setting specific, what's going on with gnomes.
Well, I mean, it sounds
monsters.
It sounds like this is being conceived a little bit like the way that the first fantasy campaign, that book had, if you were to describe it using modern words, that would be described as pretty crunchy. And the concept behind it was, here are, like you just said, it's like, if you're in the world of Blackmoor, that was Arneson, right? That was Arneson.
That was all Arneson.
Okay.
Yes.
So it was all of his stuff that he felt was integral to playing in his world, and it sounds like that's the approach that you've taken with a 64-page book. And I take it that in 64 pages somebody has to have access to something else that has country descriptions and maps.
Oh yeah, there's the setting description book has a lot of system independent information and a couple of appendices for like 5e, but it's not built to be a crunch book. It's built to be adventure hooks, regional maps, locations, dungeons, town descriptions, national descriptions, plots, conflicts. What's the world about, rather than what set of rules are you using to play in that world. And there's a big, beautiful map by Anna Meyer. She worked on it for a year. She's one of the big Greyhawk cartographers, and she likes Midgard so much, she said, I'm taking a year off from Greyhawk to work on this Midgard map, and turned over something just stellar. It looks a little bit like a National Geographic map, I think.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
so I mean, it's got everything.
National, because let me just do my plug for National Geographic. It is one of the best sources for adventure ideas.
Oh yes, it's like, oh, look at this, ruined temples in the jungle. Right, ancient civilizations and tombs. Yeah,
it's if you ever, I don't know if they're online or anything like that, but I mean that, back, because my dad, like many people from the last couple of generations, had the big stacks of National Geographics, in the house that they got.
We got them, we read them. They were full of weird and wonderful thing all around the world, and yeah, they're still great adventure inspirations. I think we had it for a while on the family iPad, and then I think our subscription ran out, or somebody deleted an icon. I haven't seen it in a while. I may need to go look again.
Yeah, I haven't either. I know that I've seen it in grocery stores every once in a while.
It still exists.
Yeah, so I think it's still out there. But anyway, so we got to National Geographic because I totally interrupted. We were talking about the map for Midgard.
Right.
So and so for those, and in fact, there are a lot of people in the OSR who are dabbling some in 5th edition, or are actually switching to 5th edition but still using old school stuff. But for those of us who are not playing 5th edition, all we have to do is not look at the appendices and we're going to be good.
Yeah, no, we made a conscious decision early on that we were going to move rules material almost entirely into the appendices. I mean, you might trip across a sidebar somewhere, but really that's about it. And that the world book was really going to be about characters and places and adventure hooks, so that no matter where you start on the map, you've got, I mean, as a game master, you have a wealth of material that you could instantly say, oh, okay, this is going to be a smuggler adventure. This is going to be pirates. We've got this, evil high priest hanging out in the woods here. What are we going to do about him? So it's meant to be highly, highly playable. And we've had enough time with this. The second edition of a Midgard hardcover. First one was 5 years ago. And so we've learned a few things and advanced the timeline by a couple years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me ask now a couple questions. First of all, a whole bunch of old schoolers, Swords and Wizardry or not, are going to go in there and do their own conversions, most likely.
Sure.
So
yeah.
One question is going to be, is there a preview of it? Obviously not of this, not of the Swords and Wizardry guide, but of Midgard itself. Is there like a preview, or where do people go to get a sense of whether they want to buy the hardback?
Sure. Yeah, there's a section of that on the Kobold Press website. So if you go to koboldpress.com, Midgard, I want to say, I think that's right. We've got a whole set of pages and a little bit of art describing the major regions, what's going on there, how Baba Yaga fits in, various bits, right? That gives you a big overview. There's also a free download that talks a little bit about, there's a short bit of fiction, there's a character race, there's a monster. That one I think is a Pathfinder preview thing, and we're going to have to update that when we release the hardback come March.
And so the hardback itself is not ready yet. So all
we are really... I should be right this minute proofreading it, right? We're trying to get it on press. Yes, it's
well,
at
least you've got chocolate.
Yeah, I've got chocolate to keep me going. The kids are sort of like, it's Christmas, but you're still working. What's going on? Well, we're trying to get this book on press. So
okay, so that's sort of what we're looking at, is that we're talking at the time when the finished product is getting imminent, but is not something that people can instantly go out and grab. When is it? When is your expectation that people will be able to get hold of it, other than the people who did get the Swords and Wizardry version on the Kickstarter?
It should all be available come March down at your local game store. I mean, that's when it should trickle into distribution. You might be able to pre-order it a little sooner and get it shipped the day it shows up at our warehouse, right? If you want to go to the Kobold Press store, order direct. We always encourage that. But, if you want to flip through a few pages first and see it at the local shop, by all means. That's totally... That's what I do.
Yeah, I think it's what a lot of people do. Well,
right.
Okay. So what we're looking at is that in March, Kobold is going to explode onto the OSR scene with the Midgard campaign.
Yep. It's gonna be a big launch for us, right? And we want it to do well. And we have these sort of vague hopes that if the OSR community says, yeah, we like it, and we'll do a bunch more. But even if it just turns out to be a cool experiment and people say, I liked your Kobold race, or I liked the shadow magic and I kept that in my campaign and ditched the rest, I think it's still worth doing. So yeah, we'll see how it goes over. I have high hopes. But
are you gonna be at
Gary Con?
Yeah, I guess Gary Con, is it gonna be out by Gary Con, or is that right when it's coming out?
It's a really good question.
Yeah, okay. So yeah,
I would love to show up at Gary Con with a big stack of books and say, here it is. But I don't think I can promise that.
No, because Gary Con is it's before the 15th, so you're talking early.
Yeah, it's
early
like
March.
13th, 14th, 12th, somewhere around there. Yes.
Yeah.
It's coming real fast.
Yeah, actually, I think it ends the 11th.
Does it? Okay, I might be wrong on the dates.
Yeah, it better be, because they got me on as a special guest for it, and my youngest son's getting married on the 15th. So if somebody lied to me about the dates, I'm going to be very, very upset. I have to send them a box with a human head in it.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that. I haven't been back to Lake Geneva in many, many years. So
yeah, and then by North Texas, definitely.
Oh, absolutely.
That'll be out, so that they're we'll see. By then we'll have a good idea of sort of what the buzz looks like on it.
Right, and people will either say, "Oh yeah, this is absolutely something we want to see more of," or we'll hear, "We stripped it for parts and it was fine," or we'll hear, "You guys don't understand the OSR."
Well, with Jeff Harkness working on it, I mean Jeff
Actually,
does
yes.
a lot of when I'm not doing conversions for Frog God to Swords and Wizardry, it's Jeff doing it. So I think
when we got Jeff on board, I was like, oh, that's a huge relief, because he has been in part of the community for years and doing really good work.
Yeah. All right, cool. Other stuff. What is are you DMing in Midgard, or has preparing Midgard caused you not to be able to game at all over there?
No, I still game. It's just I've been playing in Ravenloft for a while. That just wrapped up, and then I got into the big last push for Midgard. I'm eager to launch my next campaign. As I mentioned earlier, my daughter has a new set of dice. I'm going to launch a campaign for her and some friends. Gaming with the younger set is always interesting.
Oh, it is. It is.
I love it.
Yeah.
But I also want to start up an adult group as well. And I don't know, it seems to be par for people in the industry, or at least my group, that we run campaigns for about a year and then ditch it and do something else, right?
Yeah, because that Ravenloft campaign that you were in, is that Steve Winter's game?
That was Steve Winter's game. He ran it from Halloween to Halloween, and we met 2-3 times a month. So, 25, 30 sessions, something like. And it was wonderful, because Steve Winter is just a great DM. But we were happy to wrap it up. And it's like, all right, we did it. We did Ravenloft.
Yeah, new thing.
New
Move
thing
on to
now,
the next
please.
thing.
So that's probably what's coming for me, is I'm going to be running at least 1 and maybe 2 Midgard campaigns in 2018.
They're gonna is that same group of gonna draft you into doing the DMing then, or?
Probably. I've skipped out on DMing for a while. There was a Call of Cthulhu game I was in. There was the Ravenloft game. There was, oh gosh, there have been a number of campaigns, and I have not DM'd in for more than playtests and convention games. Okay, I've DM'd a bunch, but none of it's been long form, right? Like at every convention, I run 6 games. Okay, that's 6 games, but it's not the same as having the same group week after week for a while.
Yeah, I only just started playing long form again. That long form is a great term for that. That's,
okay. Sure, why not?
Convention games and long form. But yeah, I only just started a month and a half ago, playing a real campaign, and we're doing it online because it's friends of mine that are in different places. But
yeah,
it's been, oh my God, years and years and years since I've done a regular, meeting regularly, going through, a campaign sort of thing. I mean, it's been convention DMing and then a few
one shots. Yeah, I mean, I love one shots. We publish a lot of short adventures at Kobold Press. We do a lot of play tests, and it's all one-offs. And at a certain point, I'm like, okay, that's great. I want to sit and spend some time with the characters you guys have dreamed up. So
yeah, publishing is so different from the long-term campaign stuff. I mean, we've noticed, the best-selling items right now tend to be modules. Just going right back to the early day. We went through a period where people wanted great, huge resource books, and now that seems to be pendulum swinging back to modules. And I think there's really not a whole lot of stuff that's for the DIY long form campaign. Now you've got your guide to world building and so on and so forth is aimed at that direction.
There's all the Kobold guides are really aimed at homebrewers, right? Like the Kobold Guide to Plots and Campaigns, Kobold Guide to World Building. They're all in that category of, well, if you're brewing up your own, here's some thoughts from, and it's by and large industry veterans, designers who've been around forever, and have something to say on the topic. I mean, it's Rob Schwalb and Ed Greenwood and Chris Premise. I don't know who else. It's me. But yeah, those are meant to sort of give you an idea starter, different ways to think about plotting out your next game, and ways to handle certain trouble spots. We did the Kobold Guide to Game Mastering recently. And I mean, every chapter is, so here's what's gone wrong, and here's how you might fix it.
Okay, so are those, how system specific are those? I mean, I assume those are mostly for Pathfinder, right?
No, not at all. They have zero system specific. I mean, they all assume you're playing a flavor of D&D, right? That's their assumption, is that you're playing a fantasy RPG. But by and large, they're essays, and they're sort of like, here's how I'd handle it as a game master. And if you're trying to build a number intensive bit of mechanics like a monster, they're not going to help you, right? Because that's very system specific. If you're trying to plot out an evil villain type plot arc for 3 parts and make it work for a group of players that seem reluctant to engage with it, we may have some things that could help. Basically, they're Dear Abby for gamers. I don't know, right?
No, I mean, I get what you're saying. It would be interesting to see to what degree those mesh with some of the because I mean the old school Renaissance, the way people talk about it, tends to have it has differing factions within it in terms of what people think of as old school. Most people are pretty much, I mean, it's like, this is not a huge difference between modern gamers, but not liking the railroading side of things. So it'd be interesting to see how people take a look at what industry veterans during the pre-5th edition era, and I guess getting into the 5th edition era, what they have to say, and to what degree that overlaps. Because I think that 5th edition has a lot of overlap, a lot of potential
Yes.
for meshing in with the
with
older school
those.
stuff.
Yes.
I mean, if you were writing something, if Midgard was in one of those prior editions, written for third edition, I'd be pretty skeptical of the ability to really overlap with a lot of the old school stuff. Whereas I think the fifth edition, they really, a lot of the stuff for fifth edition has, when you're doing the creative side of it, it actually has pretty much the same underpinnings. It's just then
I mean, it's gone back to say exploration matters, right? And discovery of the weird and strange matters, right? And dungeon crawling has reasserted itself. And I'm like, yeah, fifth goes back to some foundational elements that I thought were neglected for a while. And the attitude is no longer, if it's an encounter and you're meeting it, it will be fine-tuned and balanced so you can beat it. That's
right. The one thing that all the old schoolers hated was the idea that it was always going to be okay for you to just attack without thinking.
Right. And like, Kobold Press has never been on board with that. We've always put out encounters that are like, yeah, we're going to put up the big flashing neon light saying, if you fight this, you are going to regret it.
Yeah, that's well, and funnily enough, I mean, that was Necromancer Games too in the third edition, era, the predecessor to Frog God, is that, all of the really big third-party publishers all began rejecting that idea of encounter balance from day one.
Yes, because we all said, there's something to be said for caution. There's something to be said for strategy and tactics. There's something to be said for a world that feels more dangerous because you might get squished, right? As opposed to a world where you are always successful. And that's play style, right? And that's sort of foundational for a lot of third-party public. I know Necromancer. I mean, come on, Rappanathic. It's
not, when they say don't go down the well, don't go down the well.
Right? I mean, it's not hard, people. Please take some advice. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the Kobold guides. I think for a lot of people who've been gaming for 10 or 20 years or more, a lot of that advice will be like, oh yeah, I already know a bunch of this. Some of it will be, I didn't know Zeb Cook thought differently than I, or better yet, Zeb Cook agrees with me on this topic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, or Steve Winter or whoever. But it's an attempt to sort of survey the field with those and give newcomers a leg up and give sort of more advanced dungeon masters a sounding board and a spark of inspiration. So yeah, we like doing that series.
And I think that there is, I mean, I don't know in the fifth edition, I bet you it's the same, but certainly among the old school crowd, certainly the ones that are actually more aged, since we've got young old school players, but
yeah, absolutely.
You definitely get people who are interested in the finer points of things, because you've got people who've been playing for, 40 years.
Right. They don't need a whole lot of advice at that point. They've got their
it's more
system and it's working.
Let me engage with this author and see where we agree and where we don't, and what I can get from that.
Right. So different things for different folks. I know that Frog God has done like a tome of adventure design and done other things, right, that sort of take the old school aesthetic and say, here's how we do it.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I wrote the tome of adventure.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah, that was me, and so that's along the same lines of this is for people who don't play a module. They might strip it for some ideas, but really, there's one side of the OSR, certainly a very strong group within the OSR, and the way it started out really was in a sort of a do-it-yourself approach, and so that's always been a very, very strong element, and that's why I asked about the Kobold guides, because I think that is
that's our homebrew.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, talking about sort of factions in the OSR. I mean, there's one group who are going to be like, yeah, cool. Here is a well-developed campaign, and it's got a you know, a guide for how to do it in Swords and Wizardry, original D&D. You know, that's neat. And you've got another faction who's going to be like, we really don't give a rat's ass about a campaign,
Right.
except for maybe I'll take that nice looking map and write my own stuff into it. But you know, it's the heavy DIY people, you know, are probably more interested in stuff actually like the Kobold guides, or you know, when you come out with more you know, sort of segmented material and commentaries on a campaign, that group is much more or much less interested in integrated products than they are with you know, little bits and pieces here and there, and give me a kit to mess with. So that's why I sort of pursued that when I
Well,
started.
I mean, back in the days when I was editing Dungeon Magazine, those many years ago, it was clear that there was like 30% of the audience was all about the TSR settings. You know, give me Greyhawk, give me the Realms, give me Dark Sun, give me whatever their favorite was. And 70% of the audience was, no, we want generic material. And by generic, we mean just file off the serial numbers so I don't have to. And make it a jungle adventure I can put anywhere, make it a castle and a dungeon I can put anywhere. Because they were adopting material wholesale and they weren't really interested in somebody else's setting because they had their own and it had been going strong for years. Right. And
you know what? If I had done this right, Wolfgang, I probably would have mentioned at the beginning of the video that you were one of the editors of Dungeon Magazine.
Yeah, whatever. That's on every interview. Everybody hears that from me. I only bring it up because that survey was it was really a glimpse into like, what's our audience, right? And as publishers, we all like to think everybody loves our setting because they buy it from us. But what we forget is there's a lot of people who buy our stuff for parts, for inspiration, to, you know, brainstorm their own DIY material, homebrew, whatever it is. And I've tried real hard to make sure that Kobold never turns into the Midgard company. And that we support the setting fully, but we always do things that are generic fantasy, broadly applicable. If you're playing this rule set, you can take this set of magic spells or items or monsters and run with it, right? So
yeah, and that again is I think one of the areas where I think there's going to be some productive overlap between the old school gamers and fifth edition, is that you can read something that's written for fifth edition and actually make sense of it for an older edition. I mean, obviously it's not directly usable, but you take something for Pathfinder, or, you know, maybe a little bit less so for third edition, and it was too much. It didn't work, you know, for any sort of easy mental translation, and fifth edition I think does.
Yeah, fifth translates much more readily. And that's great. I mean, you see it in the way stat blocks are constructed, the way the design builds out a character or a monster. It's more compact. Now, it's not old school compact, but it's getting away from that highly ornate design that we had basically for 15 years in the third edition era. Right?
Yeah, but well, and two, all you have to do with a fifth edition, and I don't want to get too much into the fifth edition topic, but I mean, you can look at you know, the basic description of a monster and the special abilities, and the special abilities, you know, they're in English, so you can read them and see what it's probably going to do, you know, in an old school setting. And then, you know, of course, all the numbers are off by a margin.
A bunch.
Yeah, but you can still sort of get a sense for the stuff, you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. It's a lot of material that is readily adaptable, and my impression is that the old school audience tends to adapt material to its own purposes. Pretty.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All the time. And so that's, you know, that's fine.
Yeah, no, if you need stats for Batman, you know, all you got to do is type in OSR Batman, and you're almost certainly you find anything, you know, like that. It's like this, you know, they say that there's every kind of you know, if you can think of it, there's porn for it. Well, pretty much if you can think of it, there are OSR stats and stuff for it.
That's great, right? So it's a wonderful community doing some cool stuff. I think Kobold is just throwing something into the pot here. And if we wind up saying, hey, you know, water's fine, we really like it, people seem to react to it, then we'll do more, right? That's kind of the way of the it's kind of the way the Kobold guides turned out, right? We did one, people liked it, we did more.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna run with it. I'm really pleased with the ability to run fast and light. I'm really pleased with the more general trend toward old school style play, where the challenge isn't just numeric, but the challenge is to think your way through. So we're going to encourage some of that, whether we publish it as an OSR release or whether we publish it as a 5e release. That's still sort of our attitude.
Awesome. So I mean, I'm liking what I'm hearing. I think other people will be too. Obviously, there's some people, you know, there are plenty of people who are going to be skeptical of a large publisher like Kobold coming in. But
we're huge, we're gigantic. Look,
right, gigantic. You know, you're a thousand deer. But
right.
the you know, my goal for many years, like 10 years now, good Lord, has been to get specifically original D&D gaming style out there into the mainstream. And so it makes me, you know, really happy when companies like Frog God and now Kobold are saying, you know what, that's a worthwhile thing for us to bring into our portfolio, you know, even if it's not becoming our main product, you know, which would be bizarre, you know, but as a side sort of approach, you know, it makes me really happy to see stuff like that. And so
we like to experiment. We like to, I mean, come on, we're gamers, right? It's like everybody's campaign. Everybody plays their favorite flavor of fantasy RPG, and then at some point, everybody says, "We should really bust out the Gamma world for a while," or the like, right? So,
yeah, no, absolutely.
I think that's a little of our approach to the OSR. Is like, we really want to try this. It feels comfortable. We're going to run with it.
Awesome. I think that, so we'll do another one of these conversations probably,
sure.
Maybe even at Gary Con if I bring a computer, and when we can say, okay, you know, it's actually out there and we've taken a look at it, and you know, it's this, that, the other thing, you know, here's what we think, we'll go ahead and do that.
Highlights, lowlights, what to do next time, how did you forget this? Yeah, I'd be all over that.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's go ahead, say goodbye to your fans.
Hey, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, Kobold fans.
And I will say, for all of my folks, take whatever sort of D&D it is that you play and imagine the hell out of it.